Kyla, how did it come about that you learned that you had multiple sclerosis?
I had just gotten married, and about a week later, I started to feel my hands going numb, sort of a cross across my fingertips. And I consulted a neurologist, and there was thought it was Lyme disease. There was an inconclusive range of things it could have been. I had a number of tests culminating in an MRI, and I was about to get on a plane and head to Europe. And the neurologist called me to tell me that I had lesions all over my brain and couldn't travel. From there, I was hospitalized, and a few weeks later, the positive diagnosis came back for multiple sclerosis.
So what did you think about that? What did you know about MS when you got that diagnosis?
You know, I'd been trolling around the internet for a couple of weeks wondering, what are these symptoms? What could it mean? And it was this Lyme disease, MS, Lyme disease, MS. It sounded like a terrible, dreadful thing that was going to make my life unlivable. And I was terrified when I found out that that was what it was.
Bonnie, when you found out you had MS, did you know anything about MS at the time?
What I knew about MS was very scary. Wheelchair, debilitating disease, and that's all I knew.
It is pretty scary.
I was terrified when I had symptoms, beyond explanation.
And have you had good surprises or bad surprises or no surprises in the subsequent years?
I've had extremely positive surprises.
How long ago were you diagnosed?
Actually, I've not been diagnosed. I had an isolated event, so I'm diagnosed as having, I believe the proper name is clinical isolated syndrome.
So that means you had symptoms that probably were the first episode of MS, but because you had only had one set of symptoms, you couldn't be officially diagnosed.
Yes, and that's 11 years ago.
But you had abnormalities on your MRI scan, so you're being treated just as if you have
Correct.
MS, because for all intents and purposes, you do have MS, but I imagine you're on medicine, and that's helped stem the tide.
I would hope so, and I would encourage anyone to get on medicine.
And EJ, what's happened with your MS compared to what you thought about when you first heard the diagnosis?
When I was first diagnosed about 11 years ago as well, I was in really bad shape. I had originally gone to an orthopedic doctor because I was tripping and my leg wasn't working. But I think as soon as he started to examine me, he knew it was neurological, and I was quickly diagnosed. And in about 2 years, I went from being a very active person to having to use a cane and using a wheelchair for any kind of long distance. And I'd been living in a walk-up in New York City, and I had to, I couldn't handle the stairs anymore, so I had to actually moved into the first floor of my parents' apartment building so they could help. And so the first 5, 6, 7 years were really bad, and I progressed.
So that was a pretty terrifying time.
It was very terrifying, and it was terrifying to be trying medication after medication and not really seeing any results. It was.
But yet you look as if you walked in here today just fine.
Yeah, I consider myself an extremely lucky person that one of the symptom management drugs that I tried got me out of the wheelchair and walking. And so my symptoms today are extremely different. And I mean, I never really thought I would walk again. So I think hope and all the new medications that are coming out are just so hopeful for people that have MS, because you never know what's going to work.